Welcome back and good evening if you've just joined us. This is Africa News Network and my name is Cindy Mabi. At the top of the hour, this is the story we're following up for you this evening. And it's a story of how so-called free media converted nuts or agricultural products into a bag of diamonds that got smuggled out of the country by the Guptas. The allegations stem from two clearly malicious reports, one from Business Day and another from News 24, claiming that the Gupta family is allegedly involved in diamond smuggling, but ANN7 has now accessed the details of the statement by the staff and security personnel at Fireblade Terminal at the time of the incident to show how the media distorted the facts to peddle their own fake news. And my colleague Audrey Chimwanda has more.
Well, thank you, Cindy. Very good evening to our viewers at home. Indeed, ANN7 is in possession of the deposition and the statements that were given by the Fireblade employees at the time of the search when it came to the bags of the Gupta family when they were traveling. The first is from Desmond Knutzer from Fireblade itself, and this is in quote. This exact words that came from the Fireblade personnel who were there at the search. He says, after Daniel, who's a security personnel, explained his concerns and what we could possibly be looking at, and these are two bags that are in question here. The first piece of luggage, which was luggage number one, was a big green bag, and it was filled with what was seemed to be agricultural products. There seemed to be jars that had seeds and weeds, and they were not familiar with the rules and regulations if this would be permittable to the destination of the luggage. This is coming from Desmond Knutzer from the Fireblade, and he said the second piece of luggage, which was a slightly smaller bag from the green bag that we spoke of initially, was full of electronics, the usual electronic gadgets that one would carry when they're traveling, your iPhones, your iPads, and your chargers. This is what was found to be in the second bag. And the captain advised that he would prefer that the big green bag be taken and be scanned at the main terminal, that's at OR International Airport, for them to determine if indeed the wheat products and the agricultural products will be permissible to the destination that they were going. Still, at this point, none of the statements are mentioning anything to do with the diamonds. This is the first statement from a Fireblade employee. This is Desmond Knutzer. Luggage piece number one was then got sent back through to the scanner at 6:57 to be picked up by the representatives. In this case, it was the driver, and during this whole search process, there was no obstruction either from the Gupta family or anyone for them not to search the actual bags. Taking a look at statement two now from Daniel Molate, security personnel, once again at Fireblade. He goes on to say, and I quote, after we asked a captain as to whether these two bags can be searched or opened, he granted us permission to open the bags, and therefore we opened the first bag, which was black, and it was full of electronic mics, electronic items. The bag was opened in presence of two security personnel, and Desmond again affirming what the first security official said, that the other bag was full of electronics. Still with Daniel Molate, he says he proceeded further to open the green bag. It was full of suspicious items like groundnuts. He decided not to use the green bag on board of his aircraft because, again, he was not taking responsibility in case this groundnuts, again, these are agricultural products, if they will be permissible to the destination that they're going. The conclusion, Captain, that's Mr. Nick Vermaak, ordered that the green bag must be sent back to the Guptas and the driver must take the bag with them, and this is what transpired. There's words that are coming from officials at Fireblade who again were present when the search process happened. Another statement from Thomas Mlaudzi, who's again an officer at Fireblade. He says, and I quote, the bags were searched in my presence and surely there were suspicious items in both the bags. Colors of the bag were black and green, confirming again what the other two officials had said. We then informed information manager Desmond that he was the one on duty. Desmond decided to call Mr. Nick Vermaak, who is the captain and the pilot at this point. Immediately when the pilot arrived, he granted that the bags be opened in the presence of security and Desmond. These are the other two officials who have given their testimony. Thomas Mlaudzi, officer Fireblade, again says the black bag was carrying electronic appliances and the green bag was carrying stuff that is similar with agricultural stuff. Again, three statements so far from Fireblade officials stating the same thing, that the other bag had electronics. The green bag had nuts. Again, at this moment, nothing to do with diamonds. And Mr. Nick then ordered the driver from the Guptas to take the green bag with him as he was leaving the premises, as they again could not confirm if they could actually take this agricultural products with them on the aircraft. Statement number four from Stephen Molale, is a concierge driver for Fireblade, once again says, according to the security officer, the two bags were screened again as they were not happy at all. Daniel asked me to call operations to come as the bag was not accepted because they could not confirm if the agricultural product would be permissible to the destination. He says the brown bag and the green bag were returned back. The brown was screened again and it had electronics. The green was sent back to the car again at 06:58. 4 statements there coming from Fireblade officials who seem to be confirming the same thing, that there was a brown bag and a green bag that had nuts. The brown bag had electronics. Back to you, Cindy.
Thanks so much, Audrey. Now, the articles have been further exposed after the Hawks confirmed to ANN7 that the allegations of diamond smuggling is only hearsay until now. In fact, the Hawks statement clearly ignores the facts in this case in order to create the suspicion that doesn't exist. At least that's the newspaper reports. And joining us is Keldon Ogmo, senior reporter at ANN7, Sabocha Dima and Swiso Mahlangu, political analyst, and Cecilia Russell is was editor for special projects. Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. But let's listen in to what the Hawks had to say earlier.
The incident itself took place sometime in April. That is when we were able to send out our own members within the OR Tambo to go and look into this issue. Then they went to the hangar, tried to get whatever information, and it was found that there are no basis, to open up any investigation, because it was only allegations of a bag that was having supposedly diamonds or any precious metals. But in the OB, the occurrence book, in the hangar itself, they are talking about nuts. So you wouldn't understand what was going on. Our main concern was that if that bag had left the country, then it was going to be an issue. But it was found that during the arguments between the people who were supposed to board the plane and the security, it was then decided that the person who was having, or the persons who had the bag, decided to abandon their trip. So there's no element of... Look, it's simple. We have our own customs unit that deals with these issues. And I think those are the people that would be their first call. They are the first people that would have been called to come and look into this matter. We only come in later if there is an investigation that has to be made. So we can put it clearly now that there was never any investigation. It was just an inquiry, and that was it.
And our reporter, Keldon Ogmo, wrote the story, went and investigated. What can you tell us about the details, especially that contradicts the Business Day and News 24?
Totally. If you look at the weekend reports, they've suggested, so many of them have spoken to 3 sources saying they said there were allegedly items like diamonds in the bag. But if you look at the statements or the documents that we have received, it says the statements from 3 witnesses, each of them who actually opened the bag and saw the contents in the bag, nobody says that there were diamonds. Everyone says in one of the bags, specifically in black bag, were phone, iPhone, iPad, and Apple, some of the chargers, and other phones, specifically the green bag, which has been the controversial bag. It carries some agriculture products like wheat, which further went into investigation, and that bag was never taken in the aircraft. But as you heard the Hawks saying that there never was an investigation, it was just an inquiry. And I think that is what the newspaper report got it wrong, saying investigations had taken place where there was no investigation. It was just an inquiry.
And these sources that you interviewed and spoke to are actually the security personnel who were present on the said date, the 13th of April, who had physically opened the bags and investigated what the content is and found that it wasn't diamonds, as it were.
Definitely. These were the witnesses, those who were there, who actually was there, who was at the X-ray machine, who checked the contents of the bag. And not a single person in the statement has said there were contents like precious metals, which we've heard there were diamonds like, precious metals inside the bag. So basically they've said agriculture products, specifically mentioning wheat and other nuts. So that was taken, and that was never carried in the aircraft. So that was very specific. These are the witnesses. They've written their statement, and it's 3 of them.
Yeah. And now these statements, Cecilia, is it further proof that the proverbial Gupta bandwagon is so alluring to the media that even when it's a blatant, open, shut case where there isn't, there's actually more fabrication of what the media is purporting to what the truth is. Is this the proverbial Gupta bandwagon of wanting to find suspicion and wrongdoing by any costs?
I think it was the most extraordinary story. I think that anybody that read it on Sunday would have had all sorts of bells that were ringing in their heads about the fact that there was no veracity. There was somebody who said there were two confirmations that this suspicious event had taken place, but no, and somehow or another between the confirmations and how it ended up being gems or diamonds was a complete mystery to anybody, any reader. And so, you know, in an age where media is really highly under scrutiny at the moment. There are many fake news stories going about and what have you. And when there is a reputation that can be destroyed in a minute, and in fact, I suppose the Gupta family has, had many stories written about them, and over a period of time, almost every story, relates to other stories that have been written before that have already been disproved. And in particular, this particular story also relates to a story where they say that the Gupta family fled in the middle of the night, suggesting that the whole operation is completely dodgy. We all know that story has been debunked months and months ago. The Gupta family have returned to South Africa, continue to do business here. In fact, we're owned by them. And so there were all sorts of alarm bells that went off with that story around the reporting, around how a story should be reported. And if I can just say, because I'm really here talking as a media analyst, and when I train young journalists and what have you, we always say you've got to check your facts and you've got to corroborate everything, and you've got to be able to show that your story is true. You may have an unnamed source, but your editor needs to know who the unnamed source is. You've got to have your timeline right. You've got to make sure that all your facts are correct. Otherwise, you should not go with the story. And I think so. Your suggestion that the allure of a sensational story about a family that's always, negatively portrayed in the press is one that many journalists can't resist.
Well, our viewers could also say this is self-serving, in that we're trying to be defensive by nature of who our owners are. But when you look at this particular story, and having seen the facts from what the Hawks are saying has been deposed by Fireblade workers themselves who work for the Oppenheimers, who are operating not only the hangar but the private jet, and of course we know that there was a turf war as well between, or allegations thereof, between the Oppenheimers and the Guptas as to who's going to operate this VVIP terminal at OR Tambo. So by looking closer, I'm sure the journalists could have found that this is the essence of the story, as opposed to these nuts miraculously turning into diamonds.
I believe it wasn't difficult for the journalists to find it, to find the loopholes. But we're talking about the same journalists who wrote a story. Now my issue is this, Cindy. This story was broken in April of 2016. And in April of 2016, it was a bag belonging to the Guptas. Suddenly, just before the budget, when the ABSA scandal is out, some journalist decides to rehash and say now there's a bag of diamonds, something that was never said. Why do you want to bring up or sort of resurrect a story, a non-story from April 2016 and try and rebrand it as a new story and paint a new picture to say perhaps there were diamonds there, when every journalist knows very well there were not diamonds there, there were nuts. The Hawks, the investigating body in this country, didn't find anything. There was nothing to find from the pilots. There was never even that aspersion, or there was never a scandal. There was never a representation to suggest that the Guptas were dealing in any form of mineral. Suddenly, it's 2017. It's the elective year. There's a lot of controversy going on in the country, and suddenly a journalist says, "Hey, people, the Guptas tried to take some minerals out of the country, and it was possibly diamonds." Now, why do we have that running right now? I think South Africans must ask themselves this: why? What has the media got to benefit from destroying the Gupta family? And my simple answer is there is a lot of competition. The Gupta family has come into the South Africa, has broken into a space that many families cannot bring. They've come and started very big media organizations, have great interest in the mining sector in this country and the business sector in this country. And by doing that, they've intimidated the old dogs in this country. They've actually brought many of them to their knees. And now there's competition. There's competition on this prime time slot because it used to belong to another channel. There's competition in the mining sector because now there's a new kid on the block. Now, as a ruthless competitor, what do? Bring up scandals, try and paint unfaithful and untrue nuances, paint unrighteous pictures and rumor and lies, use the journalists you already have on your payroll to run fake media, discredit these people at all costs in order to not have good competition.
Yeah, and I mean the same media will call us biased and what have you, propagandist, etc. But in this particular case, with the evidence that Kelden has got, is this not a clear case of fake news? As Fiso is saying that the timing of it is suspicious. Why now? And especially when it was agricultural products that was now purported to have been diamonds. We have evidence for the very same personnel of Fireblade who submitted sworn statements that this is what they had found as opposed to what the media says.
The question needs to be asked. I mean, if you look at the editors of the various newspapers, you can talk about Sunday Times or within the Times media stable, within News 24 stable. The question that needs to be asked, because those editors, together with their reporters or journalists, they seem to have perfected the Adolf Hitler line, that no matter how big a lie is, you must repeat it so often until the masses will regard it as truth. And that's certainly what we are seeing here. Without any facts, howsoever, that support any of this innuendo and conjecture, we see the lies being repeated over and over so that the greater South African public can regard the Gupta family and anybody associated with them as the devil incarnate who needs to be punished. And that is a sad thing in our country, taking into account that the constitution of this republic specifically protects the work of the media. It's the only business that is so specifically protected by the constitution. But at the same time, the media needs to be aware that they are not exempted from being held liable to account and to be criminally held liable for their conduct. And I'm just wondering as to how long will Parliament continue to fail this nation by not passing laws that can ensure that this type of malfeasance, this type of conduct must henceforth come to an end. Because what happens is this Adolf Hitler line of telling lies over and over, it ends up in so many people being harmed and damaged. And lest we forget what happened in Germany with the Holocaust. And what we are having here is a Holocaust by design. The question that we must all be asking now, and specifically with this matter at hand, will Mr. Nicky Oppenheimer come forth and correct this which is clearly seeming to be character assassination? Because he owes it, and particularly for him as a Jew, he will very much appreciate that the Jewish religion specifically considers the crime of character assassination to be worse than that of actual murder. So let's hope
I think that story,
he will be the bigger business
that's a different dynamic we can take to it. Sorry,
yes.
Tsepo, just the timing there, Officer Fiso was alluding to the fact that it is not a news story, so it's not breaking, but I mean, you can't resist. It says suitcase full of diamonds led to Oppenheimer fallout with Gupta's expose, and all the neon lights. It is questionable on the attempt of how this is meant to overthrow or maybe even detract from what the big stories were for the past week, i.e. the banks, etc.
I think that there were big stories, and I think that could be true, that this could be a distraction. But also, it also goes with a particular theme. You know, that it's fashionable on a Sunday to break a story around the Gupta family. So no matter how dubious the journalism,
lexicon,
but may I say something around journalism, good journalism, and good journalism practice? I think that freedom of expression is very hard won in this country, and we do have good libel laws, etc., etc. But I think that every media house needs to always take stock about where their journalism is. Even us. I mean, you're saying that, you know, people could say we've been opportunists because we found this out and it's about. But even with this information, when we do a story, we need to take stock and say, this is the evidence we have, therefore we can draw these conclusions. Without that evidence, we can't draw the conclusions. And that is what good journalism is about. And I think that it is time in an era of fake news. In fact, I was reading a really interesting article today which says that what we should do in an era of fake news is we should make sure that we doubly check everything and make sure that we do not play with people's reputations and what have you. Make sure that we have all our facts and everything in a row. Then we will be moving in the right direction as journalists, as a society, and we will not be taking our hard-won right of freedom of expression for granted.
All right, Cecilia, maybe just to bring our viewers back into the context and the genesis of the story, we're going to cut to my colleague Audrey Chimwanda for more. Over to you, Audrey.
Cindy, thank you very much. Of course, we saw the articles that were written with regards to the diamond smuggling by the Guptas from the Business Day and from News 24. Let's take a look at the articles and see exactly who and what they quoted, and ANN7 managed to speak to the Hawks to get clarity with regards to what happened there. Let's start with Business Day. They say the Hawk says that we open an inquiry into allegations that the Guptas tried to smuggle a 36-kilogram suitcase with diamonds inside. They took it out of the country to Dubai. This is what apparently what a senior Hawks official had said. However, the reality, when the Hawks themselves spoke to ANN7, they made it very clear that they never said that the bag with alleged suspicious items ever left the country at all. In fact, the Hawks go on to say that in the occurrence book, in the hangar itself, they are talking about nuts and not diamonds. So this is the first time that they're hearing of the word diamonds, and that their main concern was that if the bag had actually left the country, then there was going to be an issue there. The bag never left the country, as we have realized now. They go on to say that the Hawks said we opened an inquiry into allegations that the Guptas tried to smuggle a 36-kilogram suitcase with the diamonds. The Hawks say that the people who had the bag decided to abandon the trip. Again, alluding to the fact that the bag actually never left. Business Day says 4 sources told them that the suitcase was suspected of containing diamonds. However, they choose to ignore the facts that the Business Day completely disregarded that the suspicious items that were confirmed to be nuts or agricultural products were in the bag and not diamonds, as they have reported. 3 statements, if you remember what I explained a few minutes ago, by the Fireblade staff themselves, confirming that the items were nuts and they were agricultural items. They conveniently ignored that in their article. Also, it is perhaps mischievous to rely on 4 unnamed sources when there are 3 assigned statements. In the spirit of good journalism, you would have expected that they would have gone as far as try to investigate that from the Fireblade officials themselves, like we did. Fireblade said it had reported the incident to the police. The Hawks confirmed to ANN7 that indeed a report was made by Fireblade, but it was only made 2 months after the incident. This was in July and in June and July last year, and the Hawks say this appeared to be very suspicious to them as well, why this report was late. Let's take a look at other articles and what they reported. Still with Business Day, they say the Hawks launched a 3-month probe. That's in 2016, last year. However, the Hawks have told ANN7 that they can put it very clearly that there was an inquiry and not an investigation, and those are 2 different things. Taking a look now at what happened with News 24. Perhaps we'll take a look at that a little later. Cindy, back to you.
Thanks so much, Audrey. And Keldon, you've got documentation in your hand, which are the the submissions by your sources, and it's under oath. If you just give us a sense of what it contains.
Definitely, Cindy. These are handwritten statements by each investigating officer and also the witnesses that were present, from the securities to the captain, everybody who searched the bag, who found what was inside the bag. So they've written what we spoke about. Nowhere in this they've mentioned there was something like diamonds. Even when the bag was not open, some of the witnesses have said they found something like, very suspicious items. So I really don't know where they got the word diamond from, the precious metals from. And just to add to what Cecilia was also saying, as a journalist, I don't know where my fellow journalists got these stories from, but as a journalist, first thing, when I was given an assignment for this story, when I was going around, when people were giving me various versions of the story, speaking to different, different people around, the first thing I asked was, I'm not going ahead of the story unless I get a proof. That is the basic thing of what an investigation is about. So I asked for a proof. I looked around. I had to talk to a lot of people. And thereafter, I found the proof and decided to go ahead with the story. So I really don't know where, without a proof, someone could have written a story just on the basis of 3 unnamed sources.
Yeah, and Tsepo, you're saying that the Fireblade could be held with contempt. What would the charge
Any
be?
member of the public, the minute they become aware of any crime, they are duty-bound to report it to the law enforcement agents. The question must be asked correctly is that what constrained Fireblade from reporting what they now allege to have been a crime, and for not doing so, and for reporting it at the convenient time, I'm saying that they need to be investigated and possibly charged for defeating the ends of justice, because right now we sit here with conjecture and innuendo, but what could have been a case that, after all, we should at all material times combat all manner of crimes, including the unlawful dealing in precious metals, because they rob this nation of the revenue that it needs. Therefore, why did they not report that? 34 kilograms of diamonds is a lot of diamonds. Which mine would have produced that? Those of us who know a little bit about mining, we find it laughable. If people don't know about a subject, they shouldn't write about it. For the journalist and the editor, we can only say shame on them, because at least they should have tried to find out 34 kilograms. What type of a diamond is that?
Mind you, we invited members of the press, primarily Business Day and News 24, and they haven't responded to the invitation. It's a developing story that we'll closely be watching, but thanks so much to our panelists.